But there was nothing I could do. Having been a hunter, I had become the quarry. I was in torment, and in a way I could not understand, I derived pleasure from my suffering. Exactly 11 days after that incident, I remember it because I had swallowed its agonies as a man fasting swallows the agonies of the month of Ramadan when it falls in the scorching heat of summer. We were in Richmond Park just before sunset. The park was not wholly empty of people. We heard voices and saw figures moving in the evening glow. We talked only a little and exchanged no expressions of love or flirtation. Without reason, she put her arms round my neck and gave me a long kiss. I felt her breast pressing against me. Putting my arms round her waist, I pulled her to me, and she moaned in a way that tore at my heartstrings and made me oblivious of everything. I no longer remembered anything. I no longer saw or was conscious of anything but this catastrophe, in the shape of a woman, that fate had decreed for me. She was my destiny, and in her lay my destruction. Yet for me the whole world was not worth a mustard seed in comparison. I was the invader who had come from the south, and this was the icy battlefield from which I would not make a safe return. I was the pirate sailor and Jean Morris, the shore of destruction. And yet I did not care. I took her, there in the open air, unconcerned whether we could be seen or heard by people. For me, this moment of ecstasy is worth the whole of life. The moments of ecstasy were in fact rare. The rest of the time we spent in a murderous war in which no quarter was given. The war invariably ended with my defeat. When I slapped her, she would slap me back and dig her nails into my face. A volcano of violence would explode within her, and she would break any crockery that came to hand and tear up books and papers. This was the most dangerous weapon she had, and every battle would end with her ripping up an important book or burning some pieces of research on which I had worked for weeks on end. Sometimes I would be so overcome with rage that I would reach the brink of madness and murder and would tighten my grip on her throat, when she would suddenly grow quiet and give me that enigmatic look, a mixture of astonishment, fear, and desire. Had I exerted just that little bit more pressure, I would have put an end to the war. Sometimes the war would take us out. Once in a pub, she suddenly shouted, "That son of a bitch is making passes at me." I sprang at the man and we seized each other by the throat. People collected round us, and suddenly behind me I heard her guffawing with laughter. One of the men who had come to separate us said to me, "I'm sorry to have to tell you, if this woman's your wife, you've married a whore." He didn't say a word to her. It seems this woman enjoys making violent scenes. My anger transferred itself to her, and while she was still guffawing with laughter, I went up to her. I slapped her, and in her usual way she plunged her nails into my face. Only after a lot of trouble was I able to drag her off home. She used to like flirting with every Tom, Dick, and Harry whenever we went out together. She would flirt with waiters in restaurants, bus conductors, and passers-by. Some would take courage and respond, while others would answer with obscene remarks, and so I'd get myself into fights with people and exchange blows with her in the middle of the street. How often have I asked myself what it was that bound me to her? Why didn't I leave and escape? But I knew there was nothing I could do about it, and that the tragedy had to happen. I knew she was being unfaithful to me. The whole of the house was impregnated with the smell of infidelity. Once I found a man's handkerchief which wasn't mine. "It's yours," she said, and when I asked her, "This handkerchief isn't mine," I told her. "Assuming it's not your handkerchief," she said, "what are you going to do about it?" On another occasion, I found a cigarette case, then a pen. "You're being unfaithful to me," I said to her. "Suppose I am being unfaithful to you," she said. "I swear I'll kill you," I shouted at her. "You only say that," she said with a jeering smile. "What's stopping you from killing me? What are you waiting for? Perhaps you're waiting till you find a man lying on top of me, and even then, I don't think you'd do anything. You'd sit on the edge of the bed and cry." It was a dark evening in February, the temperature 10 degrees below zero. Evening was like morning, morning like night, dark and gloomy. The sun had not shone for 22 days. The whole city was a field of ice, ice in the streets and in the front gardens of the houses. The water froze in the pipes and people's breath came out from their mouths like steam. The streets were bare, the trees were bare, their branches collapsing under the weight of snow. And all the while my blood was boiling and my head in a fever. On a night such as this, momentous deeds occur. This was the night of reckoning. I walked from the station to the house carrying my overcoat over my arm, for my body was burning hot and the sweat poured from my forehead. Though ice crackled under my shoes, yet I sought the cold. Where was the cold? I found her stretched out naked on the bed, her white thighs open. Though her lips were formed into a full smile, there was something like sadness on her face. It was as though she was in a state of great readiness, both to give and to take. On first seeing her, my heart was filled with tenderness, and I felt that satanic warmth under the diaphragm, which tells me that I am in control of the situation. Where had this warmth been all these years? Was anyone with you? I said to her in a confident voice I thought I had lost forever. There was no one with me. She answered me in a voice affected by the impact of mine. This night is for you alone. I've been waiting for you a long time. I felt that for the first time she was telling me the truth. This night was to be the night of truth and of tragedy. I removed the knife from its sheath and sat on the edge of the bed for a time looking at her. I saw the impact of my glances live and palpable on her face. We looked into each other's eyes, and as our glances met and joined, it was as though we were two celestial bodies that had merged in an ill-omened moment of time. My glances overwhelmed her, and she turned her face from me. But the effect was apparent in the area below her waist, which she shifted from right to left, raising herself slightly off the bed. Then she settled down, her arms thrown out languorously, and resumed looking at me. I looked at her breast, and she too looked at where my glance had fallen, as though she had been robbed of her own volition and was moving in accordance with my will. I looked at her stomach, and she followed my gaze. A faint expression of pain came over her face. As my gaze lingered, so did hers. When I hurried, she hurried with me. I looked long at her white, wide-open thighs, as though massaging them with my eyes, and my gaze slipped from the soft, smooth surface till it came to rest there, in the repository of secrets where good and evil are born. I saw a blush spread up her face, and her eyelids droop as though she had been unable to control them. Slowly, I raised the dagger, and she followed the blade with her eyes. The pupils widened suddenly, and her face shone with a fleeting light like a flash of lightning. She continued to look at the blade edge with a mixture of astonishment, fear, and lust. Then she took hold of the dagger and kissed it fervently. Suddenly she closed her eyes and stretched out in the bed, raising her middle slightly, opening her thighs wider. "Please, my sweet," she said, moaning. "Come, I'm ready now." When I did not answer her appeal, she gave me a more agonizing moan. She waited, she wept. Her voice was so faint it could hardly be heard. "Please, darling." "Here are my ships, my darling, sailing towards the shores of destruction." I leant over her and kissed her. I put the blade edge between her breasts, and she twinged her legs round my back. Slowly I pressed down. Slowly she opened her eyes. What ecstasy there was in those eyes! She seemed more beautiful than anything in the whole world. "Darling," she said painfully, "I thought you would never do this. I almost gave up hope of you." I pressed down the dagger with my chest until it had all disappeared, between her breasts. I could feel the hot blood gushing from her chest. I began crushing my chest against her as she called out imploringly, "Come with me. Come with me. Don't let me go alone." "I love you," she said to me, and I believed her. "I love you," I said to her, and I spoke the truth. We were a torch of flame, the edges of the bed tongues of hellfire. The smell of smoke was in my nostrils as she said to me, "I love you, my darling." And as I said to her, "I love you, my darling." And the universe, with its past, present, and future, was gathered together into a single point before and after which nothing existed